time you know that people buy things for emotional reasons and they justify them with logic. Sometimes you'll get the engineer mind, and that person will try to reframe the conversation to take it away from the emotional and start getting into the nitty-gritty, nitpicky details and asking statistics and figures, having one question lead to another and to another to another. As a salesperson, we need to take charge of the conversation, and we need to get it back on the track of doing business, whether we want to do business with a client or the client wants to do business with us. So we need to take the bull by the horns, redirect the conversation. So what do you do when somebody tries to pour cold water on the conversation? And they're pouring cold water on the conversation by asking statistics and details and getting in the engineering track. So what do we do? There's two things we do. Number one is you give a precise answer to their question, and then you redirect it back to the topic at hand. So if they ask a question such as some kind of number or statistic, you say, the answer is 19.5 thousand and 126. Now, you can verify that later, but right now let's get back on the track of whether we want to have you as a client and you want to have us as the service provider. Okay, that's way number one. You answer the question with specific information, then you redirect it back to, before we get into that, let's decide whether you and I want to do business with each other. And then you refocus the conversation back on the matter at hand. That's number one. Way number two is you tell a story. So you're taking control of the conversation again. You tell a story, but you don't tell the punchline of the story until the very end of the conversation. That'll keep them gripped emotionally, because it's a warm state of mind, a warm thought that keeps the sales momentum going. It's the cold thought, the cold cognition of the nitty-gritty details and statistics that blows the sale, that gets you off the sales track and gets into this underlying logical thing that doesn't typically lead to a sale. It's not the best environment to lead to a sale. So you answer the question specifically, and then you reframe it. Let's get back to the matter at hand, whether you and I want to do business together. Okay? Now, way number two is you tell a story, and then you hold the punchline until the end. That will keep them gripped emotionally. Here's an example. Here's an example of a story that I might tell if they start asking about statistics or some other nitty-gritty engineering detail. Okay? So I'll say, the answer is 45. Now let's get back to the matter at hand. In fact, it reminds me of a story when I was a brand new pilot, the second passenger I ever took up in the sky. We were flying from Los Angeles to Palm Springs, and I'd calculated the timing of the weather when the clouds would hit, because I wasn't rated as an instrument-trained pilot yet. So on the way back, I calculated what the weather would be so we would land before the storm came. Well, what happened when we came over the hills out of Palm Springs, there was a heavy wind blowing toward the east, which slowed down our progress going to the west. In addition, the wind blew the storm in our direction faster, so it slowed us down going this way and sped the clouds up going this way. We got caught in the clouds. My flight instructor told me that the average lifespan for a non-instrument rated pilot in instrument meteorological conditions is about 90 seconds. So my wife and I have 2 kids. The passenger I had with me has 3 kids. So we had 5 kids and 2 wives that between us that we had to take care of. So let's go ahead. I'll tell you the punchline later, but let's go ahead and decide whether you and I want to do business together. As we were saying, okay, and then very end of the conversation. Oh, by the way, here's the end of the story. When I was doing the pilot training, my flight instructor told me it would be a good idea to have a little bit of instrument training so I would know how to handle a plane. And so he told me, don't pay attention to the outside because you get vertigo. You think you should turn this way to go horizontal when you're actually going down or sideways. So don't trust your eyes outside, trust the instruments. You have to focus on the instruments and it'll tell you if you're level. So what I did is I called air traffic control. And by the way, when I got my pilot license, the FAA flight inspector who signed me off of my license said that I had done the best job on instrument training of anybody he's ever flown with. In fact, I had to wear these things called foggles that block 3/4 of the top of your vision. All you can see is 1/4 of the bottom, and so you can only see the instruments. He said I did a better job at that than anybody he'd ever signed off. And so I kept focusing on the instruments. I called air traffic control, and they gave me radar vectors to an airport between those two locations. And I'll tell you what, by the time I got underneath those clouds about 1,500 feet and saw that runway, whew, you talk about some massive relief. We landed safely, parked the plane, got a rental car, and drove home that night safe and secure. So that's how to take charge of the story when you start getting the engineering nitty-gritty detail. One question lead to another type of customer. You need to take charge, reframe, and take control of the situation.